My plan that we're putting out today uses 55% of those funds in fiscal year 2010, or $358 million, and puts aside 45% of those funds to help balance fiscal year 2011. Lest we be tempted to use all of that money this year, we should look at the chart over here on the far side, which shows the forecasted economic recovery, or it shows that the forecasted economic recovery will not be sufficient to support existing spending levels in fiscal year 11. Look at the outlook for the next biennium for just a minute over here. This assumes that for fiscal year 10, our plan has been adopted and the budget is balanced. That's where the red line and the blue line are together. The planning estimates that CFG has made for fiscal year 11 and 12 for revenues is the red line on that chart. So you can see that without any stimulus money or any other kind of revenues, in 2011, we are projecting a deficit from just a straight line budget. This is if we just carried out a straight line budget from now on through those next 2 years. A deficit of, and I can't read that number, Mary, $622 million. And then for the next year, in 2012, $313 million. I just memorized that. That's how I can see that. Now, I have noted on that chart that we have, with that 45% of the state stabilization funds that we're holding back, we will have $293 million available to help balance 2011. And it will have to be used in 2011. That's the way the stimulus package is set up. Now, the bulk of these stimulus funds in fiscal year 10 will be used to enable local school districts to preserve their current education programming. Primarily, they'll be used to ensure that the state guarantees the same amount of financial resources per student on general classroom expenses as we're providing now. That's what's known as the SEEK formula. And I'll say it again, I've said it before, we cannot move forward if we take significant steps backward in the education of our children. Education remains my administration's #1 goal, and I will not waver from that. Now, in addition to the state stabilization funds, there are some more flexible stimulus monies that make up this $741.7 million. That comes from a higher federal match rate in the Medicaid program. Right now, or in ordinary times, we receive, for every Medicaid dollar, 70 cents of it comes from the federal government. Under the stimulus package, our match rate went to 79 cents. So we are able to utilize the additional federal money to fully fund our Medicaid program. And that's what we're doing. We are making up a deficit that we've been running in the Medicaid program and fully funding that program for 2010. And we're still able to free up, because of the increased match, $383 million in state funds that we can use to help balance this budget. So the $383 million we're freeing up there out of the Medicaid fund, and it's not a cut in Medicaid. This is simply because we're getting an increased match, federal match, that it frees up this much money, and we still fully fund Medicaid. We're getting $383 million there to combine with the $358 million, which is the 55% of the stabilization funds, and that comes up to the $741.7 million. Again, back over here on my far left, I pointed out that we'll have $293 million of stimulus monies available in 2011. That's the 45% of the state stabilization funds. This increased Medicaid match runs through the first half of fiscal year 11. And so we will likely experience some extra money in the first 6 months that we can also utilize to help us balance the budget in 2011. We don't know how much yet. I mean, you could obviously do some rough math, and if you said, well, assuming that there's the same number of people in the program and all of that, in 2011, you could take the total for 6 months might be, what, 200 million or something? 175 million or so that we might have out of that Medicaid area to add to that 293 million for 2011. You know, making sure that we fully fund the Medicaid program is a significant accomplishment in and of itself, and it's sorely needed as the down economy is swelling our Medicaid rolls every month. But again, we will not use this money, nor should we, to create new programs and new benefits that we would be unable to sustain when the stimulus money runs out. Now, for the cuts in spending. Families across the Commonwealth have had to cut spending over the past few years. For some, that means less spending on luxuries. But for many others, the cuts have caused some real pain. We've been going through the same process in state government. As I've mentioned, we've made some $600 million in spending cuts since I took office and have 2,200 fewer state employees. It is the smallest executive branch in some 20 years. To balance the last two budgets, some agencies have seen their funding reduced by more than 20%. Some of these reductions have served to simply shave off fat, making government leaner, but some have cut into proverbial flesh and bone. Services have been affected. We realize we need to cut more. Taxpayers expect us to. The times require us to. But we need to act cautiously, and we need to act meticulously. We must strive to lessen the impact on programs and services that people need to survive, and on those that will help pull us out of this recession. Therefore, my proposed cuts have been carefully chosen to preserve to the greatest extent possible our highest priorities, just like I did in dealing with the first two budget shortfalls. When we first became aware of this budget problem, our approach was this. First, we assumed more or less straight line appropriations from the revised 2009 budget. That's where we started, is to just pull out and go into 10 with what we're spending right now after we've revised the 2009 budget. And remember, we trimmed that budget in the middle of last year. Then we figured out the revenue with which we had to work. By our calculations, we start fiscal year 10 with $636 million less in general fund resources than we're spending right now in 9. That includes tax revenues, potential fund transfers, the Budget Reserve Trust Fund, and even the starting balance. That is a significant hole to make up, and thus we have to make cuts. Then we decided to identify key areas, our priorities, where we would preserve funding. In some limited cases, we're even proposing to increase funding because of unexpected expenses or because the program or agency simply cannot function at basic service levels without additional money. As the chart shows, and this chart is this one. As the chart shows, these are in the areas of education, health care, public safety, and economic development. In education, we're preserving the amount of funding that we spend per child in the classroom. This is the basic SEEK formula. So what we're proposing is that we will be spending in 2010 the same per pupil amount that we are spending right now in 2009. We are also preserving funding to higher education so that we can continue to build our research and development capability. Again, the same dollar amount that we have now in 2009 will be there in 2010.